The only time that anyone ever sees cable news is at an airport or a gym, or, you know, when they're maybe at some gas stations, I guess. So I happened to be at the gym the other day, and I happened to see John Bolton on Good Morning America warning against Donald Trump. And I didn't get the footage from Good Morning America because I don't know how, you know, happily they will shut down people's streams for playing their stuff. But I do have a clip. But John Bolton is doing a press tour, so he was on a bunch of shows. And this is just, when you see what we just went over with Rachel Maddow, and you just A/B the footage of her, you know, caping for neocon wars with what we're about to cover here on John Bolton, it's just mind blowing. Because when I was a fan of Rachel Maddow, she was a huge critic of John Bolton, and all it took for her to be on John Bolton's side was Trump. And it's basically, you know, I didn't see it back in those days. I'll fully admit I voted for Hillary Clinton, but in retrospect, you know, hindsight is always 20/20. And I can see so clearly now what happened when Trump became the Republican nominee and he started talking shit about the neocons and the Bush people and all the Washington insiders that slowly moved into the Democratic Party and became the thought leader. And that's why I love when Republicans are like, the Democrats are so evil and scandalous, they'll do this, they're not even genuine. Yeah, because they're all Republicans now. And I've gone over this 1,000 times. So let's just bask in the glory of your boy John Bolton here. Now, this is CNN just puffing your favorite neocon, John Bolton, just puffing the shit out of him. Watch this. This is disgusting.
On a third Republican presidential nomination, one of his former top aides is stepping up his warnings about what a second Trump term could look like. And when I say former top aide, of course, there are many who have issued similar.
When I need to know what's going on in politics, the first person I want to hear from is John Bolton. I mean, you know, the Colonel Sanders looking mustache guy, the little cracker dude for who basically, you know, tried to, he looks like Yosemite Sam. The guy looks like Yosemite Sam. He is literally the human embodiment of Yosemite Sam. Anyway.
Similar warnings about what could happen, including Trump's own vice president, Mike Pence. But this is one who had an office just steps away from the Oval. John Bolton will join us live in just a moment. You'll recall his book about his time working
in the White House,
titled "The Room Where It Happened."
This guy's like some kind of
it's
legend.
Out in paperback today with a new foreword, "The Room Where It Will Happen Again." Bolton is arguing that if Trump gets back into the White House, it will be the retribution presidency. He writes that Trump really only cares about retribution for himself, and it will consume much of a second term. It's an echo of what we have heard repeatedly throughout Trump's campaign.
For those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. I am your retribution.
Bolton is predicting a continuing constitutional crisis in which Trump would have the authority to order his Justice Department to dismiss 2 of his 4 indictments, or, if necessary,
kind of like what Biden's people are going to do now with his son, maybe?
Pardon himself. He warns that if Trump did so, and after a legal battle played out, the Supreme Court invalidated his own pardon, it might still take yet another impeachment to actually remove him from office. Quote, "He will not depart voluntarily."
So they're already setting up for, if he wins, you know, obviously trying to fuck up him from, you know, to stop him from doing anything.
This time, Bolton warns. On the foreign policy front, Bolton's message is also dire, saying that Trump's short attention span renders, quote, "coherent foreign policy almost unattainable." And that is most
coherent foreign policy in the way John Bolton wants it.
Harmful national security failure is the quote.
And that's, again, I keep going back to this because as much hate Trump as much as you want, he is kind of the kind of guy you need to counter fuckheads like John Bolton. I can only imagine what goes on in their meetings where John Bolton's like, "See, we need to go into this country," and Trump's like, "Why?" And he's like, "Because he's like, that doesn't make any sense." And John Bolton's like, oh, he just doesn't understand. He just doesn't understand foreign policy, guys.
Isolationist virus now coursing through the Republican Party. Bolton writes that it is a close contest between Putin and Xi Jinping. Who would be the happiest to see Trump back in office?
Russia and China both want him, for sure. They want him. You should be scared about that.
Will relish a second term, he writes. Trump.
You should be scared of Russia and China. Like, who fucking cares if Russia and China would be happy with our elected leaders? It's none of their fucking business. Who gives a shit?
Trump will want to enhance his personal relationship with Xi. He adds, quote, imagine Trump's euphoria at resuming contact with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. All three
Yeah, we can't fearmonger against him and have a war if the president's talking to him like he's a human being.
Democratic leaders, I should note, that Trump has repeatedly brought up on the 2024 campaign trail.
Kim Jong-un leads 1.4 billion people.
You know, this is good.
And there's no doubt about who the boss is. And they want me to say he's not an intelligent man. I got along with Putin.
Okay, what is wrong with that? What, like and this is again, he got in trouble for saying that Xi Jinping was an intelligent person. That's a fact. He didn't get to be the leader of China by being a dumbass.
Let me tell you, I got along with him really well. And that's a good thing. President Xi is like central casting. This is how out of touch CNN is. You're supposed to be upset by this. You're supposed to be upset that a former president wanted to talk to Russia. How dare he? After what they did to Hillary, hacking the DNC emails. Nobody in Hollywood that can play the role of President Xi. The look, the strength, the voice.
With Trump, too, it's like he does these rallies where he just talks on stage endlessly for an hour and a half because he's a fucking egomaniac who can do that and he just loves it. And so it's easy for them to grab a clip, find any of these speeches and just find something funky that he said and go, look how dumb he is. Look at that. He's so dumb. He's not that dumb. Let's continue with part 2 of CNN's filleting of John Bolton.
A second 4 will be worse. And joining me tonight is John Bolton, Trump's former national security advisor and the author of The Room Where It Happened, a White House memoir, which is out today with that new forward and those eye-opening details. And Ambassador Bolton, it's great to have you here. And as I was reading this forward, I mean, you were saying that he would cross lines that you believe would cause a constitutional crisis. And you say that it essentially would end up with him not departing voluntarily this time.
Well, I think what he would do in terms of seeking retribution through the Justice Department, what he would do potentially through the Defense Department, and some of the other agencies of government as well, would produce constant constitutional agitation.
So I'm going to get to this later in another segment, but I have a clip of Donald Trump Jr. saying, burn it all down. Like he basically saying a lame duck Trump, a second term lame duck Trump will take apart the security state because he has nothing to run for a second term. So, I mean, just the idea like that's why these guys have to fearmonger like this. Like he'll ruin everything. Yeah. For guys like you, John Bolton, of course he will. And again, I don't think Trump is some savior. I don't think, he's anywhere near the hero that the right makes him out to be. But the thing I like about him is that people like this guy are losing their minds that he might be president again. To me, that's a good thing. To me, that means like him coming back would be a good thing. Even if it's just to reset the game. I think, anyway, let's watch a little more of this trite nonsense.
To the point where I think it could cause government functions almost to break down. And when other mechanisms were applied, state
government
criminal
functions in the way he wants them to function,
federal cases, congressional oversight, we would be embroiled in litigation and controversy that could make it almost impossible to get back to normality after he's
normality.
gone.
See, and voters don't want normality. They don't want your normality, John Bolton. That's the problem.
John Bolton's normality is the problem with our government.
This is because, as I think we saw beyond question in the first term, and I tried to document in my book, he just doesn't know limits. What he cares about is the greater glory of Donald Trump. The concept of the national interest or American national security are things he doesn't comprehend. And as I say,
That sounds like projection.
pattern he established in the first term will continue in the second and just get worse.
What else concerns you,
Hopefully.
just given that you did work with him up close? You were in the Situation Room with him. You were in these briefings in the Oval Office. I mean, what else are you worried about?
Well, other than COVID, which was a long-term crisis, we really were fortunate in Trump's first term that we didn't have major international crises, the sort of thing that we remember historically as very tense times in very short periods of time. We're going through that kind of crisis, I think, now in the Middle East. There are a lot of decisions that have to be made. I don't think Trump is capable of.
So it's interesting that these tense times he speaks of didn't happen so much under Trump, did they? Everything they said about Trump, oh, he's a warmonger, he's going to get us into all these. No, ever since Biden's been president, we've had wars with Ukraine, in Israel, that we're funding. Of course, we're not in it, but we're funding it. In Yemen, we were funding Yemen. There was a whole thing with Bernie Sanders trying to stop the funding of a Yemen genocide before the Gaza thing even started. So anyway, let's keep listening to wise old liberal sage John Bolton.
Of making the decisions grounded in national security. His attention span is short. He doesn't know much about world history or world affairs. He actually doesn't think they matter very much. He
just sounds like a kid in junior high, like, he's such a dumbhead. I don't like him. He's a poohead, and he doesn't see things right because he doesn't see them my way.
His personal relationships with foreign leaders, especially the authoritarian ones, are all that matter. And while,
like, again, these guys posture about talking to, we work with Saudi Arabia, we work with Pakistan, we work with countries that have dictatorships all the time. And you don't cry about that. It's pick and choose with these guys. They're not intellectually honest, and it's so easy to see through this little cracker dickhead.
Personal relations in international.
Sorry, but I don't use the term cracker a lot, but I feel with John Bolton it's totally warranted because he is the living definition of
affairs are important,
and I have receipts for that.
When you get in a situation like we see in the Middle East now, they're not significant. So faced with these decisions,
as if these aren't enough.
Trump could go one way in the morning, a different way in the afternoon. He doesn't have the ability to stay consistent for long periods of time, except on one thing, which is how he looks in the press. And
so I love this picture, but as you can tell, that's John Bolton saying those things about you might even be the best possible endorsement you could get. And so keep in mind, John Bolton was on MSNBC. This is from CNN. He was on ABC. He was on all the major liberal talk show networks and everything. Let's take a trip down memory lane and just remember who John Bolton is. And these guys, this is from Now This, and again, hopefully they don't strike me. If they do, I'll mute it in the clips later. But this is a great little. I didn't have time to go dig up all this stuff, and they kind of already compiled it for me. So go subscribe to their channel. They do awesome work. But watch this.
The first African American is president. It is a very significant historical fact. And I take it, therefore, around the world, criticism of the United States for being a racist nation will now stop, right?
That's John Bolton, a veteran of both Bush administrations, one of the primary architects of the lie that started the war in Iraq, and President Trump's third national security advisor. Bolton was born in Baltimore to a working-class family.
So I just want to stop for 1 second. They said he was Trump's third national security advisor. That is a good sign, because that means that Trump is like, hey, I don't want to do these wars. And the national security, hey, we got to do this. He's like, no, fuck you. Get out of here. You're fired. I'm out. You're out. Again, I don't care if he fucks everything up, because it's obviously not working for the people the way it is now. So what damage could he do, really? You know, the damage he's going to do is to people like John Bolton, who use the government to shape the world in their direction. And all the stuff he's saying about Trump, the vain, narcissistic shit, is so clearly projection. Anyway.
Private military academy, McDonough School, where he first got into conservative politics. McDonough history teacher Marty McKibben said he used to have friendly debates with Bolton about things like the Vietnam War, which Bolton ardently supported. The students then were conservative, much more than they are now, but John went beyond conservative. Behind McKibben's back, Bolton referred to him as Mao McKibben. Bolton was an enthusiast.
John went beyond conservative. This guy is being lauded now on MSNBC and CNN as some kind of thought leader against Trump. This guy. Listen to who this fucking guy is.
Student organizer for Barry Goldwater's presidential campaign.
I have no
Him and Hillary
question
Clinton.
that I voted for that bill. I might have softened some of the Negro opposition to my candidacy.
Bolton's pro-war attitudes went with him to Yale, where most students were protesting against the war in Vietnam and for civil rights. Bolton wrote in his autobiography of that time that he felt like a space alien, and the protesters could damn well get out of my way as I walked to class. But his support of the Vietnam War ended when it became his problem. Bolton joined the National Guard to avoid the draft. I confess I had no desire to die in a Southeast Asian rice paddy. I considered the war in Vietnam already lost, he wrote in a Yale reunion book. After undergrad, he stayed at Yale for law school.
He supported the war until he might have had to fight in it.
And interned for President Nixon's first vice president, Spiro T. Agnew.
What a resume this guy has, right?
Who would resign in shame during a criminal investigation. One of Bolton's old friends remembered that even in college, Bolton aspired to be the highest-ranking non-elected official in the government. President Trump's third national security.
Fuck, I always do that.
I have no question that had I voted for
a space alien, and the protesters Yale for law school, and interned for President Nixon's first.
I always go to pause it and then I skip the thing back. Anyway, what I was going to say is these people all have, like, a guy like John Bolton. Look at the resume he has. He has a long career in politics, fucking things up. But Donald Trump made some bad business deals and didn't pay some contractors. Yeah, I mean, it's bad. He's a dick too. I'm not a fan of either of them. But when you stack them up next to each other, the idea that Trump is some fascist threat to democracy and the Democrats are the only thing that can save us, just, it doesn't hold up at all.
Vice President Spiro T. Agnew, who would resign in shame during a criminal investigation. One of Bolton's old friends remembered that even in college, Bolton aspired to be the highest-ranking non-elected official in the government. And Bolton would create a career out of slipping into powerful non-elected positions. He was appointed by President Ronald Reagan to the Agency for International Development.
You'll teach him
National foreign aid for needy countries. Bolton said his goal there was to turn aid away from a welfare-oriented approach known as basic human needs and make it more market-driven. Another goal of his, apparently, was to verbally abuse his colleagues. One employee said he tried to force her to lobby for less regulations on baby formula in developing nations. She refused, citing studies that formula is dangerous in developing nations because of lack of access to clean water. The employee alleges Bolton shouted that Nestle, a maker of formula, was an important company, and then screamed that she was fired.
Nestle makes the very best chocolate.
Interesting. So that's what a great guy John Bolton is. And I'm not even done. Let's watch a little bit more of this. Because I just want you to see what a stand-up liberal lion this guy is. Because he opposes Trump.
For this ad.
You needed that job, and you were the best qualified.
So he later went on to work for, I think it was Senator Jesse Helms. Hold on, let me finish this real quick.
Didn't have the power to fire her, though, so she was moved to a basement office as punishment. Around this time, he was taken under the wing of Reagan Chief of Staff James Baker and North Carolina Senator Jesse Helms, famous for this ad. Helms, famous for this ad.
You needed that job, and you were the best qualified. But they had to give it to a minority because of a racial quota.
Bolton himself would fail to get a job, too, for a very different reason. Accounts of his verbal abuse spread, and he was reportedly denied a partnership at his old law firm because of allegations of anger issues and emotional abuse. That, however, didn't preclude him from continuing to have powerful positions in subsequent Republican administrations. But then...
the American people have voted to make a new beginning.
Bolton spent part of the Clinton presidency, what he called the wilderness years, working for conservative think tank the American Enterprise Institute, alongside right-wing luminaries like Dinesh D'Souza and Dick Cheney. And then something happened in Florida.
There will be lots of suspicions on both sides about the networks making the early call, the late count that is going on, the missing ballot boxes in Broward County. And if it comes down to be just a few thousand votes, then we'll probably end up in court in Florida.
Bolton was pulled onto the team, making sure the guy who lost the popular vote won the election. He was dispatched to Florida to oversee the recount, scrutinizing votes for Vice President Gore and working to swing the election towards Governor George W. Bush. This is where he first got national recognition, as America looked at recount photos and wondered, who is this man and why does his mustache look like that?
Yosemite Sam. Cracker John.
Bush would take Florida by 537 votes and win the election. Bush would return the favor by bringing Bolton into his State Department as Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security Affairs. In this position, Bolton would play a key role in convincing the administration and America that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction, triggering events that led to the war in Iraq, a virtually universally derided conflict that Bolton stands by to this day. In more minor warmongering.
So anyway, you see, I love this photo, but what a winner John Bolton is, and why his voice is meaningless on literally anything related to politics. What a scumbag that guy is.